She started out as the perfect daughter-in-law.
Oh, he thought she was the world.
They were happy. They did so much together.
But was she too good to be true?
She lived such secret lives, different lives.
When tragedy strikes a close-knit family, police uncover a web of deceit.
You think he knew everything?
He knew who set it up. He knew who pulled the trigger.
I connected the dots, and I just knew. Everybody thought I was crazy.
My name is Aphrodite Jones. As a true crime author, I take on controversial cases. I track down the story behind the story, and I won't stop until I get the truth. The search for the truth can often be frustrating and elusive. I've come to Atlanta to explore a story of a tight-knit family's fight for justice, one that stretches across state lines and over the course of many years. It's December 13th, 2005, and 35-year-old Eric Clark is heading from his home outside Birmingham, Alabama, to Atlanta. It's a 2-hour drive for him, and he's just put in a double shift at a steel plant.
Eric used to work like 13, 14-hour shifts at the plant. Also, he worked at bartending on the side.
To make extra cash, Eric bartends at private functions in Birmingham and buys liquor in the Atlanta area where it's cheaper. Constance, his wife of 7 years, has packed him supper. She usually goes with him, but today she's feeling ill and stays behind.
Eric loved having someone to come home to. He loved having someone to take care of.
Eric was 28 when a mutual friend introduced him to 26-year-old Constance Harris. He fell hard for her right away.
When they met and they first dated, what did you hear from Eric about Constance?
Oh, he thought she was the world. She is so sweet, Mama. You gotta meet her. He loved her. I mean, he just...
You mean love at first sight?
Yes.
In 1998, the couple is married just 10 months after they met. Constance's father works at U.S. Steel in Birmingham and helps get Eric a job there.
That was a really good job working at U.S. Steel. They were happy, and they did so much together.
They were always by each other's side?
They were together all the time.
Here are two people madly in love, and they're going to have the American dream. With Eric on the road that night, Constance has Eric's sister April take her to the drugstore. Constance calls Eric to make sure he's all right.
Hey, honey, how you doing? I was just calling in to check up on you. She said, "You okay?" And he was like, "I'm all right." Bye-bye. He's fine.
It's the last time Eric's sister April will ever hear his voice. Around 9:30 that night, Fulton County Homicide Detective Kip Young gets a call about a murder.
I'll be right there. I remember that night. It was cold. It was brutally cold that night for Georgia winter.
But when he heads out to the crime scene, he has trouble finding it. The reported address doesn't appear on any map.
Can you guide me in?
A 911 operator has to direct him in.
Once I got there, I realized that it was a brand new subdivision, a minimal amount of homes that had been completed.
Detective Young sees an African-American man's lifeless body in the driveway of an empty house.
I just kind of looked at the body and saw that there were a few shots.
5 shots to be exact. 1 shot execution style to the back of the head. From the looks of it, this has all the signs of a drug deal that's gone bad. And a carjacking. Young finds the man's wallet. Inside is an Alabama driver's license with the name of William Eric Clark on it.
He had not a large amount of money, but enough where if he were to be robbed, that we figured that should have been taken.
It was hard enough for the detective to find this location. What would have brought Eric out here in the first place?
That was the biggest question at the time. Either he had knowledge or he was with someone who had knowledge of getting back here.
Young quickly learns that although the 911 callers didn't witness the murder,
Detective over here is going to have some more questions for you.
one of them did see something very important.
I saw 2 cars driving away.
One of them looked out of the window, and they saw a silver Honda Acura type car with the park lights on, and behind it was a burgundy or maroon Chevy.
The victim, Eric Clark, owns a silver Acura. That means with both vehicles, including Eric's, having been driven away, at least 2 people must have been involved in the killing. And while there was no weapon left at the scene, police quickly construct a scenario.
He'd been shot 5 times. We determined it was a medium to large caliber handgun. Didn't see any shell casings, so we didn't think it was a semi-automatic. It was a revolver of some sort.
Later that night, Eric's wife, Constance, receives a call from the Georgia medical examiner.
He's dead? My husband's dead? What happened?
She's left to notify Eric's family by herself.
Janet, wake up.
At 1 a.m., Eric's mom, Janice, is awakened by her husband, William, with the terrible news.
Mrs. Clark.
She said he was in Atlanta and he had been shot.
They were coming right over. I don't know what's going on. She said something happened.
All day and into the night, Janice had been sensing something was wrong, though she had no idea what it was.
So the day that Eric was killed, you woke up with some kind of premonition.
I didn't feel like I even wanted to go to work. I was just depressed.
In the Clark family, Eric was beloved by everyone.
I looked up to my brother like he was like my hero. Yeah. But he always had me with him. I was his sidekick.
Eric also looked out for his younger sister, April, a single mom with a young daughter.
You don't have to do that.
I was laid off my job for about a year, and my brother was there for me. He would make sure I had money in my pocket, make sure I had gas in my... he was there for me. My daughter used to go over and spend the night with them.
Thank you so much. You're welcome.
Both Eric and Constance wanted children of their own, but it hadn't happened. 7 months into their marriage, Constance convinces Eric to let her have gastric bypass surgery, telling him it will improve their chances of getting pregnant.
Really? My babies, please.
But there are complications.
She got really sick. She almost died, actually.
Constance loses her job at a bank and is too ill to find another one.
She had a lot of medical bills.
To supplement their income, Eric starts bartending. Now the only breadwinner in the family, he's determined to keep their heads above water and do everything he can to give Constance the life she wants. Eric's widow tells investigators her husband left Birmingham around 3:30 in the afternoon on December 13th. She last spoke with him at about 4:30 and adds that Eric was carrying $500 in cash.
He went down to Atlanta to buy some liquor.
He didn't have that amount on him. Of course, at the time we didn't have the car.
Following Constance's directions, Detective Young visits a liquor store where she says Eric has bought supplies in the past.
Let me see your surveillance cameras.
We don't actually have any surveillance cameras.
They had no surveillance cameras that could help us.
Does this man look familiar to you? He spent a lot of money.
The store manager made an observation, it's Christmas time.
We got so many people coming in and out.
People coming in with large amounts of cash during that time. We had nothing to place Eric there.
There's another lead to follow. Constance said her husband was supposed to meet up with her cousin, John Pierre Devon, the night he was murdered. Pierre, as he's known, lives in the Atlanta area.
What's up, cousin?
Constance told Eric to connect with Pierre because he could point Eric to a liquor store in a safer neighborhood.
Yes, this is Detective Young.
Detectives track Pierre down. On December 15th, 2 days after the murder, Pierre comes into the station.
We asked, did you talk with or did you see your cousin Eric? No, I never saw him. called me once. What time was that? He said it was about
2:37 from Eric. So you got a call from Eric between 6:30 and 7 o'clock? Yeah. Okay.
There were 3, maybe 4 questions that I specifically asked that I figured I could prove. One was, did anyone else have your cell phone that day? His answer was no. Did anyone else have your car that day? His answer was no.
Did you ever leave Clayton County during that day?
He lived in Clayton County. I was home. He said, no. After I got to the apartment, no, I did not leave.
Thank you for coming in. Appreciate it.
Pierre's answers seem plausible.
Appreciate everything you're doing to help us out with this murder. Yeah.
But as Detective Young watches Pierre get into his car, alarm bells start going off in his head.
Hold on one second. This is your car?
Pierre's maroon vehicle is just like the one eyewitnesses described leaving the scene of Eric's murder. Coincidence?
And so that got my attention.
Coming up.
I just blurted out, you killed my brother. Everybody thought I was crazy. You killed him!
Investigators are faced with a mystery. How did a man from Alabama named Eric Clark end up dead in a remote new subdivision in Atlanta, Georgia? Eric's cousin by marriage, Pierre Devon, says he got a call from Eric but never saw him the night he was murdered. Or did he?
One second. This is your car? Yeah.
Detectives discover Pierre's car is a dead ringer for the one seen pulling away from the scene of the crime.
John Pierre, he allowed us to take a look at the car. And didn't find anything of evidentiary value. So, couldn't hold him on that.
Thank you for your time.
So that's why he was allowed to leave that day.
Why would Constance's cousin want to murder Eric? They were friends, and he has no criminal record whatsoever. In my experience, you don't just go from 0 to murder. And while there's no physical evidence to hold Pierre, detectives wonder if he's hiding something. Maybe Eric and Pierre had been involved in something illegal together. But whatever the scenario, there had to be another person at the scene of the murder that night.
Knowing that the witnesses saw 2 cars, we know that it wasn't one person. It was at least 2, maybe 3, because someone had to drive that car away.
Eric Clark's silver Acura isn't the only thing missing. So is Eric's cell phone. Detective Young subpoenas both Eric and Pierre's phone records. In Alabama, Eric's family continues to struggle with what happened to Eric as they prepare to bury him.
I prayed hard that God would help me to go through this thing and that He would bring justice.
When Eric's grief-stricken little sister Kimberly rushes home from college, she gets hysterical when she sees Constance.
You killed him! What? I know you killed him! I just blurted out, you killed my brother. You told me about the insurance policy. You killed my brother for money.
Kimberly's outburst catches everyone by surprise.
You talked about that insurance money!
A month earlier, Constance had told Kimberly that she and Eric had taken out life insurance policies on each other.
I connected the dots between the insurance policy and him randomly getting robbed or carjacked, whatever. And I just knew. Everybody thought I was crazy. You know, like, don't say that. She's a grieving widow. And I'm like, no, she killed my brother.
Eric's mother, Janice, knows Eric and Constance had been struggling financially, but she can't believe Constance had anything to do with Eric's death. Yet in the days ahead, she finds her daughter-in-law's behavior inexplicable.
Sorry, I'm gonna have to move the funeral to Friday.
For some reason, Constance tries to rush Eric's funeral.
I'm still trying to get it through my mind that my baby's been killed. And she calls me that she's planning a funeral for Friday. You mean next Friday? She said, no, this Friday.
So she had wanted the quickest funeral she could possibly get.
Exactly.
In the end, the funeral is delayed until Monday because the medical examiner won't release the body in time.
I didn't see him until Sunday, and Monday I was putting him in the ground. And when we had the funeral, she was so nonchalant about the whole thing.
She sat in her seat like it was a regular day. She didn't shed one tear. I think she tried to cry, but it didn't work at one point. Everybody knew that something wasn't right at the funeral.
While Eric's family grieves in Birmingham, detectives in Atlanta appear to get a break in the case. 2 weeks after the murder, Eric's car is finally found here, parked by a rock climbing park in Fulton County. Eric's cell phone is still inside, but the car yields no clues and no fingerprints.
There was no evidence of value. No alcohol, no money.
With no physical evidence against the only current person of interest, Pierre Devon, Detective Young heads to Birmingham to see what Eric's family can tell him. He is barely inside when he gets an unexpected call from Atlanta.
This is Young.
I received a phone call from my lieutenant saying that Constance was in Atlanta to retrieve the car.
Really?
The police had yet to release the news that they had found the vehicle.
How did she find out about the car? Which I'm unable to answer that question.
Thank you.
It was strange. Strange to say the least.
This detail adds to Eric's parents' growing suspicions about Constance.
They weren't too high on her. It was a series of things that happened.
Why don't you tell me a little something about Constance?
They tell him about the life insurance policy Constance had on Eric.
I mean, she just recently took out a major life insurance policy on her son.
Really?
Yes.
Constance had taken out the policy just 6 months earlier.
Insurance didn't work up to like $100,000.
Are we trying to have kids?
Now, Eric's widow stands to collect more than $500,000. Coming up.
So now it's like, okay, you can't tell me that you weren't there. You were there.
I'm telling you I wasn't there. You're lying.
Constance Clark is the sole beneficiary of a $500,000 insurance policy on her husband, Eric. Police have questioned her cousin Pierre Devon about Eric's murder. And an examination of Pierre's cell phone records the day of the killing indicates he wasn't at home all night as he'd claimed. What did the cell phone ping reveal?
That he was at the crime scene. He was there. He was there right around the time that a caller called 911 to report hearing gunshots. And that's almost 18 miles away from where he said he was.
When detectives confront Pierre, he continues to deny any involvement in Eric's death.
You know, and I both know, you know a lot more about this than you tell me.
So now it's like, okay, you can't tell me that you weren't there. You can't tell me that you weren't in the area. You've already clarified to us that no one else had your phone. No one else had your car. So you were there.
I'm telling you I wasn't there. I wasn't there. I mean, look at me. You're lying.
What's more, an examination of Constance's phone records reveal a surprisingly large number of calls between Constance and Pierre leading up to the murder.
Looking at the series of phone calls, active. It's like, well, there's a connection there. There's something going on here.
Pierre worked a lot of nights as security for clubs, but he also had a day job.
He was a delivery driver. They delivered lumber to that subdivision.
And finally, Eric's phone records lead Young to a family friend of Eric's. This friend had called Eric as he drove the night he was murdered. This person described their conversation to police.
At 7:45 or so, incoming call to Eric. It was the family friend.
Hey, what's going on?
She said, well, what are you doing?
I'm following behind my cousin right now.
And so that kind of gave us that Eric was following Jean-Pierre at the time.
When the detective adds it all up, a plausible theory emerges. Constance and her cousin Pierre were working together to kill her husband.
Hold tight. I'll call you back soon.
The phone calls that were going back between Constance Clark and Jean-Pierre before the murder and after the murder was all telling, right? Put the murder as a central time stamp and go right before it, and you see this traffic between Jean-Pierre and Constance. After the murder, maybe 2 or 3 calls, and that's it. There's no more conversation.
And while Constance stopped contacting Pierre, she keeps calling investigators.
I never got the impression that she was concerned about how the investigation was going. I never got the impression that she took an interest as to who killed her husband.
All she seems to be interested in is getting her insurance money.
I don't know why you're not getting your money.
Every time we get right back to, so how come I'm not getting paid?
So she would pretend that she was interested in the case.
Of course. And obviously she was not. She was just interested in getting paid. And that was a lot of money, $500,000, $500,000.
Most tellingly, as investigators keep delving deeper into Constance's background, they discover she's been leading a secret life.
Constance had a drug addiction. She was addicted to pain pills.
They learn that that dependency began right after her gastric bypass surgery 7 years earlier. An addiction, investigators say, that started Constance on a dangerous downward spiral.
These pills were expensive. They $20 a pill.
And as Constance's addiction continued, it began to take its toll on the couple's bank account as well as their marriage.
He washed when he get home. He cooked. He ironed.
What in the heck was she doing?
Laying down, she didn't feel good. Or watching TV.
I think she wanted to have her cake and eat it too. But her addiction is not the only dark secret Constance is keeping. In the summer of 2005, Constance borrows $10,000 from a loan office in Birmingham, using the identity of her cousin. When the scam comes to light, Constance is charged with forgery, identity theft, and theft of property. And Eric has to bail her out.
Mom, Constance has been arrested.
He didn't believe she did it. He wanted to get the best lawyer. She was crying.
Miss Clark, no, I didn't do it. Can you call my cousin and
I called her cousin, because I actually thought that she didn't do it. She said, Miss Clark, that's my cousin. I've known her all her life. She did that. And I said, well, now, are you sure? She said, Miss Clark, take my word for it. She did it.
Investigators believe Constance did it for a very specific reason. What do you believe she used that money for?
I'm almost sure that's the money that the insurance that she bought on Eric's life.
So she commits fraud and identity theft in order to take out life insurance on her husband? Who does that? Coming up.
She lived such secret lives, different lives with different lovers she had.
Were you able to confirm that?
Yes.
When Atlanta investigators discover Constance Clark is out on bond for identity theft and fraud in Alabama, it adds another piece to the puzzle of her husband Eric's murder. The timing of the loan appears to tell its own story.
On June 22nd, Constance came in to apply for this loan. June 23rd, she received the check, received the loan. June 27th, she takes out the $500,000 life insurance policy against Eric Clark. So now I have a timeline. And then 6 months later, Eric is dead in South Fulton County. Now I have a direction. Let's look into that with a big shovel. Let's dig into that.
And that big shovel just keeps digging up more dirt. By all accounts, Eric's love for Constance was near blinding, but it was not returned. In fact, Constance had been cheating on Eric for quite some time.
Constance lost a lot of weight, you know. She probably felt more attractive, you know.
So now she's better than Eric.
She lived such secret lives, different lives with Eric, different lives with different lovers she had. You know, she was.
Were you able to confirm that? Did you confirm that she had different lovers?
Yes.
How were you able to confirm that?
I spoke to the guys. They gave statements.
And while it all looks very damning, especially to Eric's parents, to prosecutors, it only looks circumstantial. Sure, Constance may be a thief and a cheating wife, but that doesn't make her a murderer. Still, Detective Young believes he has probable cause to move against Constance's cousin, Pierre Devon. And in July of 2006, 8 months after Eric Clark's death, he does just that. Jean-Pierre Devon is charged with making false statements and being a party to the murder of Eric Clark. Pierre quickly lawyers up. It isn't long before he makes bond.
I was disappointed that we didn't have enough and it wasn't coming fast enough. We just kept plugging away.
But ultimately, all the information the investigators have gathered isn't enough for prosecutors to move forward. They make the decision not to take the case to trial. For Eric's family, it's devastating to hear that no one will be charged with murder. But they do get the satisfaction of seeing Constance in court. In December of 2007, she's put on trial for the identity theft and fraud charges in Alabama.
The DA's office in Alabama had offered her a plea. She turned it down. This is just my theory. She turned down that plea, anticipating that she would get the money from the life insurance policy, pay off the loan company, and at that time it becomes a civil matter.
Thank you.
But since the life insurance policy money didn't come through, she had to go to trial.
She is found guilty on all counts, and the judge's sentence is a harsh one: 40 years in prison. Eric's family is relieved, but it's still not justice for his murder.
These poor parents, when they discover Eric's case has gone cold, that every lead has led nowhere, are devastated. But still, they don't give up.
I made a promise to the family. I will be with this. I'll be with you until the end.
Eric's parents make the trip from Birmingham to Atlanta multiple times over the next 2 years to keep the case alive.
Everybody that said something that we thought could have helped, whether it helped or not, we informed the detectives. We had probably 4, 5 different DAs. It had gotten so nerve-wracking until my husband actually cried when they changed it again. And we fill them in, and then they go on, and you got to do it all over again.
My son deserves justice.
I prayed hard that God would bring justice and for him to just be killed and we not find out what happened. I didn't think he'd let me do that.
Finally, in late 2008, Janice's prayers are answered. The Atlanta PD launches a new cold case unit, and Detective Vincent Velasquez takes a fresh look at the Eric Clark file.
How important was it that Eric's parents continue to put pressure on police to solve this case?
We have a saying, especially in cold case, the squeaky wheel gets the grease. And it's true. If you're calling me and you're saying, look, I really need you to look at my son's case, or I need you to look at my daughter's case, we're going to look at it.
Detective Velasquez re-examines the old evidence. He focuses on Constance's lovers, weighing the possibility that one of them may have murdered Eric.
Maybe they got it wrong. There's something that we missed with an ex-lover. And I looked at it through a microscope, and I couldn't find anything. All the roads kept pointing back to Jean-Pierre Devon. This case looked like it was a murder for hire.
Velasquez comes to believe the key to solving the murder is to expose the unknown accomplice who drove Eric's car away from the crime scene. He takes a closer look at the phone records from 2005.
So what did you find?
There was one series of phone calls that took place where this particular number kept coming up right before the murder, during the murder, and right after the murder. That number belonged to Christopher Tumlin.
Velasquez discovers Chris Tumlin has a long record of offenses ranging from car theft to burglary and gun charges. He also discovers where Tumlin lived at the time.
When I look at the address is less than a mile away from where the car was dumped. Eric's car was found. So I said,
Bingo.
well, bingo, that's interesting. So I said, okay, let me find Chris Tumlin. He happened to be in our jail for an unrelated charge. I went and got Chris Tumlin out of the jail and sat him down.
But Tumlin knows the criminal justice system inside out and isn't about to cop to Eric's murder.
Jean-Pierre Devon.
No, sir.
Okay. Never seen that guy before in your life?
No, sir.
Sure?
Positive.
Positive. Okay.
I know if I've seen somebody, I don't forget faces.
He denies knowing anything about it. The detective shows him pictures of where police found Eric's car.
So there's a house right across the street, and there's a lady that lives there. And guess what she saw? And he's like, what? I said, she saw you. Chose your photo, put her finger on it, and said, that's the guy I seen getting out of that car.
Now that lineup story is not true.
That's not true. But he fell for that.
I ain't kill nobody.
It takes a number of interviews, but Detective Velasquez manages to wring a confession from Chris Tumlin.
He said we were just going to rob the dude.
So you Pierre? Yeah.
Tumlin admits he sold Pierre the gun and saw Pierre shoot Eric down in cold blood.
Just kill him. Don't let him out of here, man.
He is also able to explain another mystery.
We know what time the gunshots happened because we had a 911 caller. But what was puzzling was I see a call between the victim's phone and Jean-Pierre's phone after that timestamp. So I'm like, wait a minute.
Eric was dead, but someone was talking on his phone to Pierre. Tumlin admits it was him.
He took Eric's car and basically called Jean-Pierre and had a conversation.
All I did was get rid of the car. Chris Tumlin said, no, I'm not going down for murder. Yeah, I took the car. Yeah, I was with Jean-Pierre. No, I did not shoot it.
Tumlin's account of Eric's murder gives prosecutors the ammunition to rearrest Pierre Devon. But will it give them enough to finally charge Constance with Eric's murder? And make sure she never gets out of prison for the rest of her life? Coming up.
He said something about, it's robbery. This woman down in Alabama wanted her husband dead.
She is a chameleon. She can adapt in any situation. No one would ever suspect her to be the person that she really is.
Chris Tumlin's confession that he was at the scene of Eric Clark's murder finally cracks a case that has remained unsolved for more than 4 years and shines a harsh light on Eric's wife, Constance.
It's you, a gun, and a dead body.
Painstaking interviews with Tumlin tell the story of what really happened the night Eric was killed.
And finally says, I just thought they were going to rob him, but admits that I was going to benefit from this robbery financially.
What was his tape going to be?
Well, whatever they got.
This dude called me up, said he needed a favor, so I sold him a gun.
Then Tumlin drops another bombshell.
Yeah, what's up, man?
There was a third man at the scene of the crime. Tumlin says it was a man named Corey, a middleman who had introduced him to Pierre.
I'm just gonna rob the dude. Alright, I'm in.
That night, all 3 men head out together to intercept Eric. What happened that day, the last day of Eric Clark's life?
He got in his car, he drove here, he had several conversations with Constance on the way.
Hey.
One of those conversations took place in Eric's sister April's car.
Oh, and I was just calling to check up on you.
I'm alright.
She calls to check up on him as Eric drives to Atlanta, knowing that she is driving him right to his death.
Okay, well, I will talk to you later.
Alright, bye.
At what point did you realize that she was using you as an alibi?
When I found out that my brother was killed.
He's fine.
I just think she's the worst type of person. She is a chameleon. She can adapt in any situation, hide in plain sight, and no one would ever suspect her to be the person that she really is.
At some point after Eric arrives in the Atlanta area, Pierre tells Eric to meet him at a local gas station in southern Fulton County.
All right, listen, meet me by the gas station on,
After the two cars pull in, Pierre instructs Eric to follow him.
Just, follow me, all right? All right, let's go.
Eric's not from Atlanta. He has no idea where he's going.
Jean-Pierre is having his cousin follow him. He's leading a lamb to slaughter. A confused Eric gets out of his vehicle.
Hey, man, where you got me out here, man?
And approaches Pierre's car.
I would imagine in my mind that he's just happy to see his cousin, but maybe questioning, wait, why are we here? This doesn't look like a liquor store.
Right. Of course she's questioning that.
Where are we?
Jean-Pierre gets out of his car and just begins shooting. And when he falls to the ground, shoots him some more.
What the hell are you doing, man? Just kill him. What the hell is wrong with y'all? Yo, man, I'm out of here, man. Let's go.
Soon after, Pierre and Eric's cars are seen driving away. Tumlin calls Pierre on Eric's cell phone.
Listen to me. I'm going to dump this car.
Later that night, as Eric still lay dead on an icy driveway, phone records show that Constance places 2 quick calls to Pierre from her home in Birmingham.
I mean, I think then a conversation took place between him and Constance to tell her, hey, it's done. It's a done deal.
Okay.
So he called me and told me about him know a dude that his wife wanted him killed. I said, no, I don't want nothing to do with that.
Christopher Tumlin agrees to testify without a deal.
No parts of that.
Now that he finally has an eyewitness, the DA agrees to charge Pierre and Constance with murder. But Tumlin's record could be a problem. Why should the jury take his word over Pierre's? So investigators keep looking for the third man, Corey Branch. Finally, they find him in April of 2011, just as the case is about to go to trial.
I love it when things fall into place. Last minute, in the last hour, the jury is already being chosen. And boom, they find the missing link.
Did you see Pierre kill Eric Clark?
Yes.
Corey corroborates Tumlin's story.
It's supposed to be a robbery.
And agrees to cooperate with authorities.
Well, if you testify.
He is not charged with a crime. Now, the prosecution has 2 eyewitnesses to Eric's murder.
I like that I'm getting it off my chest.
He broke down and cried. He was like, this has been eating at me for quite some time.
Corey also says Pierre told him the man's wife wanted him dead.
A woman wanted her husband killed.
Corey's testimony is invaluable to the prosecution. Chris Tumlin pleads guilty to voluntary manslaughter, hijacking a vehicle, aggravated assault and gun charges, and gets 10 years. In April of 2011, Jean-Pierre Devon is convicted of hijacking a vehicle, possession of a firearm in the commission of a crime, and felony murder. He's sentenced to life plus 25 years.
When they said that Pierre was found guilty, it was a sign of relief, but I was still angry. I can't ever see my brother again.
Just 4 months later, Constance Clark goes on trial.
Our case against Constance was purely circumstantial. There's no physical evidence linking her to the crime. And quite honestly, I was concerned. I'm like 50-50.
When I sat at that trial, I was hurt because she's sitting there like nothing happened. You know, she did not cry, she did not show any emotions or anything. And it hurt me because actually the pictures that I saw, those were the first time I saw those pictures. Those pictures really did something to me. I was so angry. And I was angry not only with Constance, I was angry with God. Because I'm like, God, why couldn't you save my brother?
Constance's trial lasts 17 days, but it takes jurors little more than 8 hours to render a guilty verdict. She's convicted of the same charges as her cousin and gets life plus 5 years to be served in a Georgia prison after she completes her sentence in Alabama.
So what happened when the verdict came down?
I looked over at her. She was no emotion whatsoever.
Nothing.
Nothing. Nothing.
You think he knew everything?
Before he died.
You do?
I do. I think he saw all of it. He knew who set it up. He knew who pulled the trigger. He knew who was involved. And when he saw God, he told me, I'm ready to go home. I'm tired.
For Eric's family, the convictions haven't really brought the peace they had hoped to find, but they are glad the uncertainty is over.
Did you forgive Constance?
I forgive her. I do forgive her, because that's what I have to do. In order for me to see Eric again, I have to have a forgiving heart, but I'll never forget it. The hurt that she did to me, I can't get over that.
What really matters to this family is getting their son back. And no matter what kind of justice they've gotten, that they'll never see.